So today's wallet review brings one of the toughest wallet scenarios that I've ever been faced with. See, Sebastian is not just chasing luxury travel for himself. His heart's in the right place. He wants to bring his close family too. However, there is not a lot of wiggle room, and his goals are very ambitious. So the strategy, it's got to be sharp. This is Subscriber Credit Card Consulting, and Sebastian's wallet, it's in the hot seat. So let's dive right on in. Let me introduce you to Sebastian and Sebastian's wallet. First, let me give you everything Sebastian is working with. Sebastian is a very experienced credit card user. He's been in the game since 2018, but has rapidly ramped up his setup in just the last few years. Sebastian carries the Bank of America Customized Cash Rewards, which was the first card that he got. Then in 2024, Sebastian added the Capital One Venture X and the Capital One Saver card. He also added in 2024 the Chase Sapphire Preferred and the Chase Freedom Flex. It seems like 2024 was a banner year for card applications and approvals. In 2025, Sebastian also brought on the rapidly growing in popularity PayPal debit card. Between all 6 of these cards, Sebastian carries an annual fee load of $490. It's not nothing, but I'm not alarmed considering 2 of those cards are the very manageable Venture X and the Chase Sapphire Preferred. Now a few other basic details on Sebastian. He's got a decent credit score between 670 and 739. His income ranges between $40,000 and $80,000, and he supports a household between 3 and 4 people. Now, Sebastian let me know that his top priorities are earnings categories, travel benefits, and sign-up bonuses, which will really come into play as I completely strategize to meet his goals, which are he wants to travel to Rome with his Catholic grandparents, take his mom and in-laws to Europe, travel constantly with his wife, and visit one more country than years of his life that he lives. So if he lives to be 75, he wants to visit 76 countries. Those are incredible goals, not just for yourself, but also selflessly to share some of these experiences with the closest people in his life. Now, the last things to note is that Sebastian is open to business cards, and his favorite hotel chain is Hyatt, which totally makes sense with those 2 Chase cards that he's got in his setup. Now that you know what I know, let me take you inside my mind and tell you the things that I like and the things that I didn't like when first hearing about Sebastian's wallet and his approach to his goals. The first thing I love is the great earnings coverage with the multipliers that he has. I'm going to take you inside my credit card roadmap template, which you can download for free at rdguarantee.com/guides, but I love to use this as a personal starting point to evaluate anybody's setup and start to help answer any questions that they have. Diving into Sebastian's cards laid out on that template, I can see that a minimum, he's earning 2x from the Venture X on anything he spends. But in a lot of those higher spending categories, it's often 3x and sometimes up to 5% back, which I assume that Sebastian is using his PayPal debit card in the grocery category. Sebastian certainly has a hybrid setup, but it does lean more to travel, which is going to be perfect for his stated goals. And I do want to point out for those who haven't heard of it, the PayPal debit card is becoming so popular because that 5% you can get back on a category of your choice up to $1,000. Well, that's extremely overpowered in today's credit card meta. So a lot of people, like Sebastian, are hopping on board with that card. As for things I don't like, I don't have a lot to complain about. Sebastian's running a modified version of the Chase Trifecta with the Freedom Flex and also the Chase Sapphire Preferred, and he's got the Capital One Duo locked down, and I love the versatility that that's going to provide him. If I'm getting really nitpicky, it's that Sebastian simply hasn't done enough to achieve his stated travel goals. He's got a good broad-based setup, but he's probably trying to attack too many things all at one time, and between the 2 issuers, Chase and Capital One, probably doesn't feel like he's making a ton of progress towards all of those goals. At the end of the day, some common fixes for the problem of just not feeling like you're getting far enough in the credit card game is understanding strategically what airline or hotel cards that you can use that work good off of your base setup that help you achieve really specific goals. By the way, I hope at this point you can start to see the two basic approaches I take when breaking down a wallet setup and potentially use it when you review your own cards and the roadmap that you want to build to achieve your travel goals. I'm always looking first to see if the earnings categories that you're spending most in are covered by high earning cards. Second of all, once you make sure that if you're earning lots of points in step one, that those points can actually be redeemed to do what you want to do. Otherwise, what's the point in having a ton of credit card points with no use for actually depositing them into a memory or an experience that you wouldn't have had otherwise? Let me dive into my recommendations for Sebastian. Sebastian stated 3 key goals. 1, we need to get Sebastian and his grandparents to Rome. 2, he wants to take his mom and in-laws to Europe. And 3, long term, he wants to travel to one more country than years he lives in his life. I already said my problem is Sebastian having probably 2 big goals with not a realistic way to accomplish this, at least in a short time period. So first step here, Sebastian, we have to prioritize your goals. Because you laid out taking your grandparents to Rome as the first one that you submitted, and there's probably a bit of a time crunch there with wanting to get that done while they can still enjoy it and are young enough to experience that with you. That's the biggest priority in my mind, so I'm going to help you accomplish that today. Goals 2 and 3 are longer term plays, but I also want to make sure you're set up well for that, so we'll integrate that as well at the end. Step number 1 is to beef up on your current Chase ecosystem. I recommend you do this by adding in the Chase Ink Cash card. I'll admit, Sebastian even floated he was considering doing this himself, but the Chase Ink Cash card is a $0 annual fee business card. This is great because we don't add an annual fee to the annual fee load that Sebastian already carries. It also doesn't impact his 524 tally, and he should be able to get approved for this, being currently at 424. Now, Sebastian, the current welcome offer is $750 in cash or 75,000 Chase Ultimate Rewards points. I don't want you to go for that. You can hop onto uscreditcardguide.com, look at the Chase Ink Cash card, and see that the typical high offers are around 90K points. Be patient, wait for that offer, and lock that in. Step 2, I want you to complete the Chase trifecta. This means adding the Chase Freedom Unlimited, and I'm not necessarily saying that you have to spend on this card, but you need flexibility long term to be able to achieve your travel goals. When you need to turn on the faucet and gain tons of Ultimate Rewards points, you'll put your non-category spend into the Freedom Unlimited and bank Chase points so you can access the Hyatt transfer partners and some of the other valuable Chase partners. In your current setup, you're using the Capital One Venture X and the Capital One Saver Rewards to earn 2, sometimes 3x points on all purchases, and that's great. That will set you up really well for those specific international flights that you want to take later on in your life. Also, I want to earmark some Chase points from the Chase Ink Cash and the Freedom Unlimited sign-up bonus for something very specific. Don't forget about that, but let's move to step 3. Step 3 is set the goal and target the trip. I already said, Sebastian, we're going to look for a way to get you and your grandparents to Rome. Let's get right on that. I dove in and looked through the possible options to make this trip a reality. Pointsya.com was my starting point and an awesome resource for flipping through to see every possible way we could maximize points to get this trip down to as cheap of a cash cost as possible. Now, I don't know where Sebastian is, but there are 3 cities that stand out on the east coast of the United States to get Sebastian and his 2 grandparents over to Rome. Those target cities are either going to be Washington, Philadelphia, or New York City. Now, all of them have good potential routes and relatively cheap international flights. However, Philadelphia seemed to be the best option amongst those, so I'm zoning in on Philadelphia, and this is where those Chase points start to come in from the Ink Cash and the Freedom Unlimited ads. No matter where Sebastian lives, he's going to have to get him and his grandparents into Philadelphia to take off for the international flight. For simplicity, using your stash of Chase points to get to Philadelphia on the 1.25x multiplier in the Chase Travel Portal, thanks to your Sapphire Preferred, is probably going to be the way to go. And you should be able to take care of most of that through those sign-up bonuses. Now, back to Points.yeah. To book that international trip, American Airlines had the best options for using points. It's always a best practice to look at one-way flights when you're hoping to find award redemptions. When I look outbound from Philadelphia to Rome, we see a few different options that pop up. Now, one option that Points.yeah suggests is an outbound trip going from Philadelphia to Rome by sending Capital One miles over to Qantas and then booking the American Airlines flight via the Qantas American Airlines One World Alliance for 21,000 points plus $238.50 in taxes and fees. However, with that option, you just get killed on taxes and fees. Remember, we have to book 3 tickets, and 238 times 3, well, that's a lot of cash outlay. The option I like better is just one below, and that's the American Airlines flight. That's only going to be 27,000 miles plus $5.50 in taxes and fees. And while the point outlay is higher, you're saving so much on the taxes and fees that it's just a better booking process. Now, to book 3 tickets to get you over to Rome, you're going to be looking at 81,000 miles. If you were doing a cash booking, you could find that same exact flight on AmericanAirlines.com for $464 a ticket or $1,392. Yikes, that's a lot, and that's why we're going to value points and miles to make this trip happen. Now, let's talk about getting home at the end of a week-long trip. Looking at Rome to Philadelphia, the second leg of those 2 one-way flights, American Airlines is still the best option. Booking those same 3 return tickets home, it's going to be the same 27,000 points. Now you're being charged $62.61 in taxes and fees, but unfortunately, there's no real way around that. Again, 27,000 points times 3 tickets, that's another 81,000 American Airlines miles that you've got to come up with. You can find this same flight, however, on AmericanAirlines.com for $711. That's $2,133 total just for the return trip if you were booking in cash. Comparing total cost in points and miles, you're looking at 162,000 miles. Comparing total cost in cash price, you're looking at $3,525 in cash. Now, for a lot of people, that amount of cash spend is going to be just simply prohibitive and probably enough to not make that trip happen. Especially with Sebastian supporting between 3 and 4 people in his family, there's just not that much wiggle room in a normal person's budget to get that done. And that's a real problem that so many of us face when we're looking at these once-in-a-lifetime trips. However, the best and most cost-effective way for Sebastian to do this can make this journey a reality. And I'm recommending opening 2 American Airlines credit cards to get that done. Does that sound like a lot? Well, maybe, but wait until you hear the value return on this trip. The 2 cards Sebastian should target are the Citi American Advantage Platinum Select World Elite MasterCard, as well as the business version, the Citi and American Advantage Business World Elite MasterCard. Both of these cards have a $99 annual fee. However, that fee is waived in the first year. Now, you're currently seeing different sign-up bonuses for these cards. However, we know historically that I want Sebastian to target at least a 75,000 mile sign-up bonus on both of those American Airlines cards. I don't want him to settle for anything less, because the significance of that is we can look historically and know that it's possible. And finally, when you put those 2 target sign-up bonuses together, with that and the necessary spend to trigger those welcome bonuses, Sebastian is going to be above his threshold that he needs of 162,000 miles to make this trip actually happen. Now, for those of you who are cent per point nerds out there and want to know the cent per point value of this actual trip playing out, well, we're going to plug it into our cent per point formula, which is cash price minus taxes and fees divided by the total number of miles necessary to make the trip happen, and then multiply that by 100. When you plug those numbers in, Sebastian's getting a valuation of over 2 cents a mile. And in summary, he's essentially getting himself and his grandparents on a once-in-a-lifetime trip from Philadelphia to Rome and then back for the cost of 2 $99 annual fee credit cards that don't even trigger that annual fee in the first year. Now let me show you where Sebastian stands now, after all of that is said and done. If you look at his updated roadmap template, he really didn't have to change his core setup. And Sebastian, big credit to you for putting yourself in a strong place from the beginning with your earnings coverage. I did suggest adding 2 Chase cards, 1 business card, and 1 Chase Freedom card for some flexibility with your ability long-term to flip between Capital One and Ultimate Rewards points based on your future travel goals, because clearly you're going to be traveling for the rest of your life. The in-cash sign-up bonus also, of course, comes in handy to get from wherever you're at over to Philadelphia, New York, or Washington, your preferred destination airport for launching over to Europe. Finally, we've identified 2 specific benefits-based cards out of American Airlines to fund that sole trip, all while keeping the annual fee load still pretty low. These are cards that Sebastian can keep if he feels that they're giving him positive value into the future, things like some small benefits as well as some free bags that may come in handy. However, they're still pretty easy to get out of and downgrade or cancel if they're just not returning the stated value that Sebastian thinks he would get long term. Now finally, there's some real challenges with this setup that Sebastian will have to overcome himself. One, we already said this, but not all of these travel goals, because they're so big and so lofty, can be achieved all at once. 2, I want to be careful about the annual fee load. We have a lot of manageable cards, but they're starting to add up. So I encourage Sebastian to really watch that and not overextend himself in the effort to make these trips happen. Finally, card management is going to get complicated. This is an expansive wallet at this point, with base cards, benefit cards, and different cards to rotate into based on exactly what he needs. I would suggest a card management app, sort of like Card Pointers, which I have a discount link for you in the description if you find yourself in a similar place as Sebastian. Now, as always, take these recommendations with a grain of salt. You have to make your own decisions based on what works best for your financial situation and lifestyle. Thank you so much for watching this edition of Subscriber Credit Card Consulting, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.